Hello world and true believers. Sorry I haven't really made a video this week, but I started directing that website I told you guys that I've been talking about. It's I got the domain name. It's, if anybody wants to find it, it's lostaspygirl.com, lost hyphen aspy girl.com. But there's nothing there yet because as soon as I thought about it, I wanted to get the domain name, but then I realized like I needed to get some stuff to put up there. I have stuff from my old website, but I realized that it needs to be tweaked a little bit to now that I've kind of gone this far on my journey. I realize some things need to be developed or change a little bit to accordingly for the things that I've learned over this past what is like year since I took it down. It was a little over a little less than a year ago that I took it down. So there's that. So look for that. You can go there now, but there's nothing there. But it'll be up hopefully in a couple of days. So that means probably that I will start making less videos because I'll be more focused on that and writing. But I'll try to make a video to as a supplement to the website. But today's video, I actually want to make this particular video on emotion regulation and on impulsivity, because I've been thinking about this. And before I even get into that, like I know I told you guys before that, how I mentioned in my last video about how, like in Fight Club, what they say, and actually I got that quote wrong from Sucker Punch. It's if you don't stand for anything, then you'll fall for anything if you don't stand for anything, or if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything, or something like that. So I got that confused. But in Fight Club, it's it's only when you lose everything that you're free to do anything. And I told you guys know how I got put on disability. I was strongly suggested by Human Resources, and then I got a doctor's note. And then the thing is like for me to get integrated back into work, since I'm on SSI now, I need a note from my doctor to say that it's okay to go back. But I don't have a doctor anymore because my psychopharmacologist moved, and she and the place that she moved to doesn't accept my insurance. And so whatever, that maybe that's a video, that's a subject for another video. Okay. And I just think it's kind of ironic. But the other thing is, like, after that happened, I know they seem very happy and everything now. I wasn't at first. I was very discouraged and not in a good place, and I ended up getting in a car accident, and that happened for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'll say that I drive like a crazy woman. Like I drive really, really fast. And one of the things, I think this is interesting, over the years that was encouraging for me, and this is something that I think other girls might be able to relate to, is that when I get caught, whenever I got stopped by the cops, they never gave me a ticket. It's not because I like did anything. Like I think I would be really scared because I would literally sometimes at nighttime at like 3 o'clock in the morning, if I was driving home from work, I left early or whatever, because I worked overnights. On the back streets of Watertown, I don't know what would happen, but a lot of times a car next to me would rev his engine, and I always drove stick shift standard, and I had a Honda Accord. It's not fast, but whatever reason, that this was like, better off dead. Like it was like they gave me a challenge, and I was like, oh, you want to race me? I'll totally race you. Not that I was gonna ever beat them, but invariably, like a cop would see us, and they would take off because they'd be in like a Monte Carlo or some kind of fast car that was, no problem taking off. So the cop would always pull me over, and I would be scared shitless, but the cop would always let me off, which kind of encouraged my behavior, because I'm like, you know what I mean? Because each time that happened, I would get off. But so after I got put on disability, I was in a good place, and I was driving probably way more recklessly after that than I should, because I just didn't give a shit anymore. And I don't know, I ended up getting into a car accident, and I was very belligerent with the cop. I actually told him I thought he was part of secret society of dominant men that are trying to, I don't even know. I won't even get into all that, but thought about telling you guys that story. But anyway, so this got me to thinking. Like we've talked a little bit about impulsivity and emotion regulation. Mostly in my comments to people, more so than in videos, but a little bit in videos. Like for a number of years, I was a very big supporter of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as DBT, because I would go, like first, like even before I started learning about in therapy, I actually bought books on it back in like, I don't know, 2003, 2004, trying to figure out how to better control my emotions before I knew what was going on with me. And then when I started getting hospitalized more and more often, they would have me go to these day programs, and one of the biggest things that they would have for the groups in there were CBT or DBT. And at first, like I said, I was a big proponent, like I was a big supporter of these types of therapy. But, you know, in the last few years, I started thinking about it, and I started, like, the more I would go to them, and each time I would get frustrated because I would try to do all the exercises that they told me to do, and it didn't work. If anything, it seemed to make things worse. Not only did it make things worse, like I told you guys, like I was very med resistant. So here I am, I'm taking these medications they're telling me to take, and they're not working, and I'm having all the side effects. And I'm feeling not very good at all, and having difficulties concentrating, and feeling all hazy and weird and uncomfortable, and having akathisia, which is we're having these involuntary muscle spasms and stuff. And it's not even just that I tried the antipsychotic medications. The one I actually didn't like things like they put me on Klonopin for a while, and I did not like that because it made me very, very tired. What I found when I was on it, I was actually more impulsive than I was at other times, and that was difficult because I felt like I was less able to control my actions when I was on that medication, and I actually asked to be taken off of it. And these things, like after a while, you start to question it. Like, is it, you know, there must be something more to this than meets the eye, like a transformer. But and I wanted to try to figure that out. And what made me, what kind of every once in a while, like something that was always niggling at the back of my head. And one of the things was, I told you guys I had a therapist a long time ago in my early 20s, and I called him my Yoda. And one of the things he told me, like whenever I would have a bad depression or have a difficult time or whatever, he would tell me that sometimes the more you fight a thing, the stronger it becomes, and sometimes you need to just accept having that emotion and process it. And I didn't understand it at the time, what he was saying to me. And then, like a couple of years ago, like after I got put on disability and I'm having all these difficult times, and I ended up getting arrested, and I'm thinking about all this stuff, and all of a sudden I started having these epiphanies. And one of the epiphanies all of a sudden was, I don't even remember how I saw it or whatever, but I just saw, and I've talked about this in a couple of comments, the Chinese finger trap in something. Someone was fighting against it, and it was only in the moment when they stopped fighting what it was that was going on were they able to free themselves. And all of a sudden, this is going to be weird, and this is how sometimes I'll make these weird connections that seem from some random event that probably to someone else would never make sense to them. But I saw this, and it made me think about what that therapist I would call my Yoda said to me, and it made me think like why I didn't CBT and aspects of DBT didn't work for me, because they were about behavior modification. If you know anything about CBT, one of the biggest things is this triangle. So they say that thoughts affect behaviors, affect emotions, affect thoughts, and then it goes the other way around. Thoughts, like if you change your thoughts, you can change your emotions, you can change your behavior. It's all really about affecting your behavior so you are normalized, so you act the way you're supposed to act in society. And I started realizing part of the reason this never worked for me is that I wasn't processing my emotions. What this was telling me to do is to like basically fake it. Like if you change your thoughts, if you fake it, if you pretend you're happy, then you will be happy. If you behave a certain way, then you'll start to feel that way. And I think that works well for neurosocials, but I don't think it works well for us. I think that if we try to suppress our emotions in one place, then they'll start to come out in other places. And I think that's why sometimes we'll become impulsive. And our impulsivity isn't the way a lot of times, and I'm not saying that this doesn't happen where we might have we might self-medicate or do other things, but I'm just saying that our impulsivity, I think a lot of times, there's a lot of times I know what I have problems with is things that I don't seem to be able to control. Like if I start to try to control my behaviors or my feelings in one thing, then the next I become more sensitive the next time to where I'll either break down in a situation or need to run away, or maybe if I'm suppressing another, like hunger or something, I'll find myself doing something that I might not, but I'm not, there's no thought before it. It's like I don't even have that much control to even think about it enough before I do something. Like I did when I was driving recklessly, and I did that with the cop. Like there wasn't enough thought to realize the consequences of my actions. I didn't give myself permission to act in this way. I just did, and then afterwards I was like, what the fuck was wrong with me, you know? And I started realizing that trying to do this, trying to suppress our emotion isn't the way. That what we need to do is we need to channel our emotions. That's why and it doesn't have to be like, I'm not saying that we should act inappropriately all the time in public or in society, because that's going to get us in trouble sometimes. I mean, I think that we should be able to a certain extent, as long as we're not causing problems. But if we do have strong emotions about something, we need to release that primal energy in some fashion, or it's going to come out somewhere else. And processing those emotions, and I don't think just journaling is enough, because that might help you to face an emotion, and I think that's important to sometimes confront and look in that proverbial mirror, and that's one component of it. But I also think that there's a lot of pent-up energy that a lot of us on the spectrum have that we're not allowed to release, and if we don't, then it will come out unexpectedly in negative ways elsewhere. Because I don't think we have that ability to do things. Like I think a lot of times people, neurosocials, like what they'll do, they'll be angry maybe about work or whatever, then they'll watch a sport and they can like yell at the sport, or maybe like they'll take it out, but they'll take out their emotions. I think they do the same thing, but they're able to do it in a way that's very appropriate. Kaj on here talked about like there being like a kind of like how our mind isn't protected. They seem to have like a buffer where they're able to do this more like acceptably. I don't think that we have that the way they do. So we have to find creative ways. Like one of the things I learned to do, like I've told you guys before, I've taken mixed martial arts, and I'll practice that. The other thing is like I love to dance because it's very primal and it gets out a lot of energy in my room. Or I drum, you know, or like even painting. It's very cathartic, and there's something primal about that where I can lose myself to that. And I'm going to say this if it sounds inappropriate, sex is also very primal, and it's a way to release energy in a more constructive fashion without having any of the negative side effects. Of course, that should always be consensual. But I just, like I think that is very important to us, and I don't think that any of the programs that are out there right now talk about that. They're all about suppressing emotions or distracting yourself. Like one of the things, like I took a lot of emotional regulation groups, like facilitated groups where they discuss like for emotional regulation was to distract yourself long enough to not give into the emotion. And I think that works in the moment, but the emotion is still there, and until you process it, that the energy is going to be there just sitting idle, and it's going to cause problems later if you don't find a way to release it. And the only thing that I feel like in CBT that was actually ever been helpful for me is this whole thing about automatic negative thoughts, where they call ants, or they call it negative automatic thoughts, NATs. And it's about like if you start to have them, there's this whole exercise on challenging those thoughts. So like a lot of times I know sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and I'll be flooded with a lot of negative automatic thoughts. And because that's usually when it happens. It doesn't seem to happen at other times for whatever reason. And I'll have difficulty starting my day. And what I started doing is this exercise where you kind of write down the emotions and you rate them, and then you and you actually write out the scenarios, like what are the thoughts that you're having, and you rate your feelings accordingly, and then you start to challenge them. Like what is, like logically looking at it and deconstructing each emotion and confronting it. And it actually works very well. After a while you're able to do it in your head, and then it actually helps them to subsist. But that's actually confronting something, and that's one of the few ways that it actually discusses in that, of confronting your emotions and dealing with it in real time. Most of the other things are about behavior modification and about scheduling and distracting yourself and doing all these other things, but not actually ever really confronting your emotions. And that's kind of something that I definitely have a problem with. DBT, I think, is a little bit better, and that's dialectic, and it actually has the word dialectic in there about the two opposing, like, seemingly opposing concepts existing harmoniously in real space and time, because it's about it's dialectic behavioral therapy, and it's kind of saying, it's accepting that you might have a dual nature and being okay with it, like saying, I accept myself as I am now, knowing that I still need to change certain things about myself to improve and become better. And I kind of like that concept a little bit better in this, although it's still about behavior modification, and I don't necessarily like that part of it, because it's still about normalization and making us fit better into society. And I don't, but I think that the approach to it, at least, is a little less kind of invasive and I think in some ways traumatic. I think that when you don't confront your emotions and they're there to just left to sit and idle, like, they're going to cause additional problems. I think that it's very important to process, especially for us, because I think that we're very self-aware, and we understand that they're there, and if we don't face something and try to understand it, because I think that we're all about understanding a thing, whether it be ourselves or other people or a situation or whatever it is we want to understand. And so understanding our emotions helps us process them a little bit better. So not just like maybe journaling and trying to face those emotions and confronting them, whether they be automatic or various other things, but also channeling that negative energy in a very constructive manner, and whatever means you feel will be helpful to you. I think that that's more important. I think when you start to do that, you become, and I've noticed this about myself, since I started doing all this kind of stuff, I become way less impulsive. I don't do things impulsively anymore. And the reason I don't act out like that as much, except in like really crazy situations, like where that time when I told you guys about how my brother was like in my face and kind of yelling at me, and I ran out of the house in my bare feet, then I might act a little bit impulsively. But I mean, it's not where in situations where I can't even foresee it happening, like maybe I'm out in public and the smallest thing will set me off or get me or trigger something like a hunger or whatever, something weird, and I say something or do something that's impulsive, and I don't know how to control it, and then I regret what I did afterwards, and though I try to learn from it. And I think that's one of the good things about us. We don't just dwell in regret. We usually try to look at these things, see them as learning opportunities. At least I hope that's how it is for most of us. I don't think that's probably true for everybody, but I think that it is true for a good portion of us. And I think that we all have the potential to do it. Seeing these things as a kind of a learning opportunity, trying to figure them out, and then find a better way, being like the foxy frog, and finding a better way to deal with these things, and getting past it. So I think that is important for us. I think that we can use these types of therapies as a tool. Actually, and I think curiosity is another tool that we have. Like, I actually wrote this story, and I told Naysayer about this girl who used curiosity to dig herself out. She had dug herself this hole of depression, and she didn't know how to get out of it. And everybody was like telling, like her how to get out of it, and she, like, to use the different tools in her tool belt, like perseverance or cleverness or strength or all these things, but she didn't know how. Like, it didn't help her actually climb out of the hole. Like strength wasn't going to help her. The dart kept falling down on her. Perseverance didn't matter. The more she tried, she kept falling in the hole. Cleverness didn't help, because even when she tried to like push her hand as far into the hole, the dart became loose, and she kept falling deeper and deeper into this hole. It wasn't until she came upon curiosity on her tool belt that she was able to look around and find different elements within the hole to help her, like tree branches or some stepping stones and stuff like that, to actually help her climb her way out. And then she was able to use the other tools on her tool belt, such as strength and perseverance and cleverness, to put these things together. But it wasn't until she utilized her curiosity that she was able to find these things. And I think that I actually wrote this before I was diagnosed, and I think that's interesting, because I think we use curiosity as a means to do a lot of things. I think sometimes it gets us in trouble, but I think more than often than not, it helps us find a better way. And so that's kind of what this is about when it comes to impulsivity and emotion control. I don't think that necessarily the means that the neurosocialists tell us is the better way. I think that we will need to find our own truth or truths when it comes to this in a way that makes sense for us, in whatever form that might take. And I think one of those forms is to, channel our energy constructively. And take that. I think that that's not necessarily going to work for everybody because we are very neurodivergent. We're very different, all of us, in how we develop. And I think that we all need to find our own way that makes sense for us. Because I think blanket therapies don't necessarily work. I think sometimes you need to find something that works for you. I don't know. I hope that's helpful. Again, if you guys have any feedback or questions or anything, let me know. Okay. Oh, and hopefully I have my website up in a few days, so we'll have a safer space to talk and discuss these things. Okay, bye. Thanks, everybody.